The thing they sold you about your blood is the thing that data keeps refusing to confirm. I want to talk about a number, $3.8 billion. 13 years, 18 countries. That was the cost of the Human Genome Project, finished in 2003. Most expensive science the world ever paid for. And when the results came back, there was a finding tucked into the appendix that the lead researchers were not ready to talk about in public. A genetic pattern common across sub-Saharan Africa and the African diaspora that matched the haplogroup markers found in ancient Levantine priestly lines. Not similar, matched. The papers got published. The conversation stopped. That's the first receipt. Here's the second. 1997. A geneticist named Carl Skorecki, working with Michael Hammer, published a study in Nature. They examined Jewish men who carried the family name and oral tradition of the Kohanim, the priestly line of Aaron. They found a specific cluster of Y chromosome markers shared across that population at a rate that random chance cannot produce. They called it the Cohen modal haplotype, traced it back to a single common ancestor about 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago places that ancestor inside the period the Bible names as Moses, Aaron, and the founding of the Levitical priesthood. The genetics did not contradict the book. The genetics shook hands with it. Third receipt, 1999. A man named Tudor Parfit published in the American Journal of Human Genetics. He had gone to southern Africa to study a people called the Lemba, who live in Zimbabwe and South Africa. The Lemba had been telling outsiders for generations that they descended from ancient Israelite priests. Outsiders laughed. Parfit ran the Y chromosome data on Lemba men. They carried the same Cohen modal haplotype at a rate comparable to Jewish populations who had kept written genealogical records unbroken for 2,000 years. Black men in Africa carrying the priestly marker. The story they had been telling about themselves was the story the chromosome confirmed. Fourth receipt, 2022. The National Institutes of Health published a study mapping Y chromosome diversity across populations in West and Central Africa, in regions that fed directly into the Atlantic slave trade corridor. The researchers were not looking for Israel. They were doing public health genetics. In the appendix of that report, in a single paragraph, they noted an unexpected concentration of J1 haplogroup markers. J1 is the broader family that contains the Cohen modal haplotype. They flagged it for further study. 3 years later, that further study has not been funded. That's not an oversight. That's a decision about where the money goes. Fifth receipt, the consumer DNA companies. Around 2020, Ancestry DNA and 23andMe began noticing an increase in African American customers requesting raw haplogroup files instead of the colorful ethnicity pie chart. Reason being, the pie chart is calculated against modern reference populations from present-day West Africa. It is not designed to surface ancient Near Eastern signal. The interface hides what the data underneath is showing. People started downloading the raw data. People started finding J1 and J2 in their files. The companies do not put that on the front page. The front page is the pie chart. The truth is in the file underneath. Sixth receipt, 2018. Henry Louis Gates, the Harvard professor, on his program Finding Your Roots, ran the genealogy of a Black American guest. The Y chromosome analysis came back with markers that did not match any West African reference in the standard databases. The geneticist on camera said, and I am paraphrasing carefully, that it was a mystery the data could not resolve with the current tools. The guest was told to consider the possibility of undocumented European ancestry. Nobody on that broadcast said the words ancient Near East. Nobody said Levite. The question was raised on national television. The question was buried before it finished surfacing. Now lay those 6 cards on the table and look at them together. The Genome Project finds a pattern in African and diaspora populations that matches Levantine priestly markers. Skorecki and Hammer prove the priestly marker traces back 3,000 years to one man. Parfit finds that marker in black African priests in Zimbabwe. The NIH finds it concentrated in the regions the slave ships drew from. The DNA companies hide it inside their interfaces. A Harvard program runs into it on television and looks the other way. That is not a coincidence. That is a record. And what the record is showing is a lineage that the documented science cannot explain inside the story we have been told about who black people are and where black people came from. Now, hear what Scripture says about a record like that. Numbers chapter 3. The Lord speaks to Moses and says he has taken the Levites from among the children of Israel in place of every firstborn. The Hebrew word he uses is li, mine, a people claimed by name, not volunteers, not converts, a people set apart by appointment with their genealogy maintained in writing because the priestly office depended on proof of descent. Then turn to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. The Apostle Peter, writing to a scattered people living as strangers in a land not their own, calls them a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. The Greek word translated peculiar is peripoiesis. It means a people acquired as a possession, purchased, claimed, set apart. 6 receipts in the data. 2 scriptures naming the verdict. The verdict is this: the lineage exists. The lineage was scattered. The lineage was not destroyed. The lineage carries a marker that the modern laboratory keeps finding in populations the modern textbook says have no business carrying it. And the institutions equipped to follow that marker to its conclusion have decided, as a matter of funding and editorial policy, that the conclusion is not worth pursuing. They are not pursuing it because of where it leads. It leads to a people who were told they had no history before the ships. It leads to a people who were told their ancestors were rescued from darkness by the same civilization that profited from their bondage. It leads to a story that, if it stands up, dismantles 400 years of justification for what was done to them. That is why the footnotes do not become headlines. That is why the anomalies stay anomalies. That is why a paragraph in an NIH appendix sits there for years without a follow-up paper. The data is doing its job. The institutions are refusing to do theirs. But footnotes accumulate. And there is a point at which footnotes stop being footnotes and start being a body of evidence. That point has already passed. The conversation has not caught up with it yet. The book of Numbers said the Levites belonged to the one who chose them. The Apostle Peter said a scattered people remain a royal priesthood. The chromosome says the marker traveled. The chromosome says the marker survived. And the silence around it, the careful, well-funded, professionally maintained silence around it, says exactly how much it costs somebody to keep that finding from reaching the people it actually concerns. The receipts are on the table. Read them yourself. Read them slowly. And then ask why the people most equipped to read them out loud have chosen not to.